Hello, everybody. Well, we are here for a return trip episode. We got Richmond next week. We just came off the Halloween high, and we went back into the archives. This is an early episode, episode 27, I believe. And this was one of my passion points. It's called Lesser Known National Parks. And that's because I feel like it's fairly easy to get the guides to the big parks, and there's tons to do. But the lesser known national parks often less populated with people, so you can do more stuff. You can get in and out, and just beautiful, underappreciated natural gems. So we've got a healthy geography spread here. They're all ones that I've visited and that I recommend. And we'll surely we're probably going to do a second lesser known national parks episode very soon because, of course, the parks were very popular during the pandemic time. So, with that, please enjoy this return trip to lesser known national parks.
Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Kiernan, how are you?
You know, this seat taken, it's really taken on new meaning to me since the airline etiquette episode. I'm really thinking about the logistics of seats and taking them.
You know who's not going to be saying this seat taken anymore?
Who's that?
Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah. No, he's personal
sorry.
space. He's all about personal space. He understands his limitations. Yeah. But you know what? We're not talking about Joe Biden today. It's not a Joe Biden themed travel podcast. Today, we are talking about lesser known national parks.
National parks, nobody cares about.
No. I see that you've called it national parks nobody cares about. That's not fair. I care about them, and I'm somebody. So you could call it national parks somebody cares about.
True. And after this episode, everyone will care about these national parks.
Absolutely. It's going to totally transform the landscape. I'm a big national park nut, so I'm really looking forward to discussing these. I'm going to recommend 5 lesser-known national parks that I've been to. And but I do want to say these are not the best 5. I don't like. I'm not a father who chooses my favorite child. You know, I love all the national parks equally.
I don't believe that there is a single father who doesn't have a favorite child, but perhaps.
Who was your father's favorite child?
I would say the child that he imagined I could be if I wasn't sort of an effete musical theater kid.
Okay, so your father's still looking for a favorite child out there. Well, if anybody's interested, get in touch with Ryan's father. But Ryan, before we jump into the meat of the topic, I have so much to say on these national parks. I thought we would dive right in, but there was some major news that I'm going to technically call it a recalculating.
Yeah, I think that it is a big enough deal that it should just be its own episode, but in lieu of that, a recalculating.
Recalculating.
All right, so recalculating is when we revisit a topic that either we've made a mistake on, or, and somebody's often written in, or it's a follow-up on a conversation or topic we've investigated before. And there's some big news on a topic that has come up with great frequency on our podcast, and that is
WOW Airlines.
WOW Airlines.
They shuttered overnight. I mean, it just stopped. I mean, people were boarding the planes. I think there might even have been planes in the air.
And they just dropped right down. So WOW Airlines, an Icelandic airline company, a budget airline company. And I went to Iceland in November, and Ryan has been brutalizing me for having taken WOW.
Yeah, I've been making fun of you because everything I read about the WOW experience makes it seem like not much of a wow, more of like a
more of a airlines. Well, it was no frills, but it was perfectly comfortable, and I quite like the purple of their logo. But basically, they have all financing has fallen through. They've grounded their planes, but they didn't even have like a wind down session. It was just like one day they texted all their I want to say their victims, their passengers, and said, "Hey, remember how you've been visiting the wonderful land of Iceland and need to get home to your family and job? Sorry, we've ceased operations, and you're gonna have to figure it out."
Yeah, Now, I know that you loved WoW. So do you actually remember where you were when you heard the WoW Airlines had shuttered?
I believe, did the New York Times do a push notification?
I want to say. I mean, I know that the second I heard,
Yeah.
I reached out to you as if you had
Kiernan, are
lost
you
a
all right?
relative. Yeah,
Kiernan, are you all right?
yeah.
I will say I got a flood of texts from listeners.
Sure.
So it's hard for me to remember exactly the moment where I was, but I do know that I had to sit down
Yeah,
because
you shouldn't share your number online again because you're going to get all those texts from listeners.
the idea I shouldn't have given it to Donald Trump and then made him an enemy. That's a real political deep cut for those that remember Lindsey Graham's cell phone being given out. Is president's best friend now, so who knows? I got a lot of texts. And the idea that I'm not going to be able to board another WoW airline is very sad to me. And I'll tell you, I think it's particularly hard for those who were planning to fly WoW Air because one of their only other options is Iceland Air, which is quite expensive. So if you were expecting a $50 fare to New York, sorry, my friends, you're going to be paying a pretty penny.
And there are rumors that some of these other sort of, I guess we would call them sort of budget transatlantic airlines are in trouble because it is, it's expensive to run an airline, and if your flight to Iceland is $14.99, maybe that's not actually representing the cost of flying you through the air to across the world.
Well, you call them transatlantic. I think we got to start being skeptical of these airlines that come out of the United States and then go, you know what? We got to just sit down in Iceland for a few hours.
Yeah.
And then we'll hop back over. Maybe that was the first sign we should have seen. I will say, though,
I thought they were just a scam to get people to Iceland,
Yeah.
but
no, I think that's how they all started. But Iceland doesn't need a scam. It's an amazing country.
I know.
If you don't know that, listener, go back. We've got a great Iceland episode you should absolutely download.
But do not take the advice on airlines because...
No, definitely go with Iceland Air. They're a solid airline. I've always been a fan. Now, Ryan, I was reading in the press about, what caused this? What were the factors in this collapse? I want to read from the New York Times. They had some information from the founder and chief executive of WoW, former founder and chief executive of WoW. His name is Skuli Mogensen. And, he's probably on the market, anybody who's hiring. He blamed the collapse on, a number of different things, rising fuel prices, as you might expect. He said that there were, quote, stricter payment terms, unquote, that were putting pressure on the company's cash flow. So, people, some of these financiers were definitely sniffing this failure in the air. But most interesting to me is he blamed bad publicity.
Bad publicity?
So my question is...
Was that my fault?
Do you think you took down WoW Air?
I mean, this is a powerful podcast, and we have to be aware of the power we yield when we talk about things.
I think that you've got to be careful with your language. But, this also gives you a chance right now. Is there any other company right now that you want to take down?
Oh, I mean, pretty much any company that I have to interact with on a day-to-day basis.
So go ahead, put them out there. What do you hate?
No, but you know what? I would be really heartbroken. My WoW Airlines, the budget airline that I fly most often is Interjet, which is the Mexican budget airline.
See.
Yeah. So I'm just shout out to them.
Interjet.
They're great. They're great folks over there at Interjet. They give you more tequila per flight than any other. This is a true story. They bring that little cart back and forth the entire flight. I just shout out to them. I hope they keep going.
Absolutely. So we are pro Interjet, and there's no companies you want to take down.
I don't want to limit our sponsorship opportunities by being negative about any of the wonderful companies out there.
Ryan, I originally had an idea. Maybe we should take down some airlines that are already defunct. But good Lord, if you just go to the Wikipedia page, I'm absolutely going to link to this. It's incredible. Just if I read you some of these, I mean, granted, they go back to the 1930s, but Barnhill and McGee Airways, you can't get that anymore. Bluegrass Airlines, it's a great name.
That's great.
And that's just the bees.
Did Hooters Air ever continue, or was that a thing?
I don't know anything about that.
We can talk about that later. Hooters has great Wi-Fi, FYI.
I'm looking. Hooters Air 2003 to 2006. I'm glad that failed. I've heard those planes a little top heavy.
Oh, folks, this podcast is free. Okay.
I've been riding internet too much. I've been really going after the booze they serve there. Let's see. You got New York Air, of course, the famous Trump Air.
Right.
It crashed harder than his presidency. And yeah, I love these names though. I think we might want to do a future episode on failed airlines.
I think that sounds like it could really take off.
Well, let's raise a glass. R.I.P. to WOW Airlines. You got me to Iceland. You got me just in the nick of time back from Iceland. And for those who are still awaiting their flight, I'd recommend you take a look at Iceland Air.
I think it's time to do something that we can't do on WOW Airlines, and that's take off.
Let's take off.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Kiernan. So, I've been to some national parks in my day, but I know that national parks are really like it. You and Teddy Roosevelt are like the most committed to the American national parks. So,
Yep. And we're actually going to talk about one park that we can thank TR for.
only one?
Only one that he actually put aside, yes.
Gosh,
Well,
you should have
you
put more
know,
acres
it-
aside.
It was early.
What was he
it
doing?
was early in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Please, he doesn't need his record defends itself.
Ah,
So today we're talking about some lesser known national parks. Particularly,
Right.
we're going to dive deep into 5. I'm going to tell you some interesting stories behind them. But of course, I just want to clarify. You know, the National Park Service oversees lots of different types of things. So they oversee historical landmarks like Ford's Theater. But they also, and those things are called national monuments by and large. So national
Right.
monuments are objects of historical, cultural, or scientific value.
right.
Whereas national parks are much more meant for sort of the scenic, inspirational, recreational value that they have. And
Right.
typically they're much larger national parks. That's not always the case, but typically they're a lot larger. And some parks will start as monuments and then eventually become parks. Some of the ones we're going to talk about today actually trod that path.
But these are all administered by the same governmental agency, right? Like rangers are still at monuments.
So there are rangers at monuments, but often there is shared administration, and it can be forestry service. It can be several different services. But the parks administration really is seen as kind of the default. But if, for example, you have a national monument that's inside a national forest, it'll be shared administration.
Gotcha. I know that when I went up to the Ulysses S. Grant tomb, there was a fantastic ranger there. So I guess that's a monument, but also sort of a park.
Yes, that's a monument. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a monument run by the National Parks Administration. Love those ranger outfits. I don't
Oh
want to
my
dive
gosh.
too. I think the life of a ranger is going to be a follow-up episode. I've read
Sure,
some
sure.
great books written by national park rangers. But Ryan, you probably know some of the sort of most popular national parks, right?
Yeah, like Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, absolutely. Yellowstone, the first national park, one of the most famous. Yeah, I'll tell you, I bet you would have a hard time guessing the most popular national park.
The Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon's number 2. Good guess.
Gosh, I would have thought it was sort of Yellowstone because I always hear about Yosemite.
Yosemite, actually, Yosemite number 6. Number 1 is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Really?
Yeah, they get over 11 million visits a year.
Well, the Smoky Mountains are gorgeous, so that totally makes sense.
It's also because they have easier access to major population centers. So, you don't have to drive 8 hours through the plains in order to meet them. I know you and I, for example, we've long talked about going to Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota, but you have to take off like a week to get there.
Right. Yeah, you can't just jump on a wild jet and be there. You have to actually, rent a car and stuff.
But quite amazingly, if you've got you've got almost 11.5 million visits to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The next most populated park, Grand Canyon National Park, at 6 million visits. So almost double
Wow.
in Great Smoky Mountains.
That's interesting. Dolly Parton runs her own sort of Smoky Mountains amusement park called God, what's it called? Is it called Dolly's
Dollywood,
World?
right?
Dollywood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dollywood.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
I have been there when I was a kid. When I did my sort of country trip. Oh, I did the flume ride at Dollywood. Of course, I did.
Oh my God! Well, we're gonna have to revisit Dollywood. As far as I know, that's not a national park.
It
proper.
should be. It should be.
So
Because Dolly is a monument. Okay, Dolly is an American
she's
monument.
a national treasure for
Yeah,
sure. I'm
okay.
not sure who exactly what a public administration would oversee her. But you got the Great Smoky Mountain Grand Canyon National Park. Then you got Rocky Mountain National Park, Zion, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Acadia, Grand Tetons, Olympic Glacier. These are all this is top tier national park, right? That's not what we're
Right.
talking about today. We're talking about today a bunch of parks that you've probably never heard of. So let's dive right in.
All right, let's dive.
All right. So the first recommendation I have is called the Badlands. Badlands National Park in South Dakota.
Yeah, and I know of this because I think there's a Terrence Malick film called Badlands that is set in this national park. So I
Really?
think
Do you know anything about it?
I want to pretend that I've seen it because Terrence Malick's an important director, but I have not seen it, nor do I know much about it. I just know it's called Badlands.
Can I be honest? I have no idea who that is.
Oh well, you know, because I'm a film guy, so
Yeah. Okay. Who is it? What else has he done?
Terrence Malick made 4 films, and they always take 15 years to make. And I think the most recent one might have been The Thin Blue Line. No, you know what? He made a movie with Brad Pitt that was about the creation of the world, and the first 30 minutes were
yes. I remember that one.
That's Terrence Malick.
Well, listen, if I were making a movie about the creation of the world, Badlands, South Dakota would definitely be featured. So the Badlands is in what are called the Black Hills of South Dakota, and these are, I believe, the second highest peaks in the United States besides the Rockies. And so on your drive there, you pass all this lovely mountain scenery, and also it's well paired with visiting Mount Rushmore. So if you're going to Mount Rushmore, throw in the Badlands National Park. They have a very pleasant hotel on the grounds there. And what the Badlands are known for, I mean, obviously, if I were marketing this, I probably wouldn't have named it the Badlands.
Well, Badlands just sounds kind of cool. It's like Badlands. You know?
Oh, I like that. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. If you kind of called it no, you don't want to go there. Those are the Badlands.
Yeah, I want to go there immediately.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a very harsh landscape, sort of these big ancient rock formations, cliffs and spires, and they're very majestic and beautiful to look at, and they have rock striations, which is when there's been erosion and weather, you can actually see these beautiful bands of different rock types in time, and it really gives you a sense of this rich history that they have there. But it's relatively little water. They've got these kind of big sweeping canyons. Like if you were trying to ride your horse through these areas, or you were a pioneer trying to bring your covered wagon through it, these would be some very bad lands.
Why is it called Badlands? Is this the name of the area? Is it how is this
So
named?
the Lakota people, the Native Americans
Right.
who traditionally were in this area,
They called it Badlands.
they called it the Badlands
Right,
because
okay.
it reflects the harsh environment. And then
Right.
some of the early European settlers, particularly the French, also referred to it as Badlands. But Badlands, that is a name that gets thrown around in North Dakota, the Theodore Roosevelt National Park that I mentioned before. Those are called the Badlands as well. I believe there are Badlands in Montana. In fact,
Right.
I actually think that film might have been about Badlands in Montana.
Right. Yeah. Yes, it was. As we found out when I just looked it up a minute ago, it was about Badlands in Montana. So there's a lot of Badlands.
I didn't want to waste time getting a whole recalculating on it, okay?
No.
So Ryan messed up. Badlands was in Montana. Please do not email us. Though if you do want to email us, Ryan, what's the email again?
It's outofofficepod@gmail.com.
We love your emails.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really love about the Badlands is that they have really rich fossil beds. So they have found everything from ancient rhinos, horses, saber-toothed cats, and they actually have a small museum there where they do show you some of the fossils that have been discovered there. So it can be a great place to bring kids, and you can still see a lot of wildlife today. A fair amount of the park is prairie, and so you will come across bison, bighorn sheep, prairie dogs, and then you can challenge yourself to find black-footed ferrets. But I know when I was there, I was not able to find them. They're very elusive.
I can't even think of what a black-footed ferret would look like.
Tell you what,
to know if I've seen it or not.
I'll throw one up on the Instagram, and I feel like you have not seen it. I feel safe to say, having that you've not been to the Badlands National Park. Very unlikely in New York City. You might have seen a rat in the subway that had stepped in some tar. That would be easily mistaken for a black-footed ferret. I'll just give one last shout out for the Badlands hotel scene. When Catherine and I visited, there are sort of two places to stay. One is kind of a nicer area in the park, and then one is kind of a not as nice hotel on the outskirts. And we got one night booked inside, and then we had to stay at the less nice one. And, going back to a tip that Ryan and I always have, which is you really want to be kind and nice to the concierge, the staff at a hotel, because you never know what they can do for you.
Love your concierge.
I went up and I was looking very angelic, and I was kind, and I asked, "How are you?" And I said, my wife and I are only here for the night. Actually, at the time, she was my girlfriend. My girlfriend, I probably should have said wife in case this was a good Christian woman in South Dakota. I said, we have just the one night here, and we're supposed to move down the road, but is there any chance that there's an opening? And conspiratorially, she leaned across the desk and she said, "Do you know, I just had a cancellation. Technically, I'm not supposed to allow you to book it here, but just don't tell anybody, and I'll let you move cabins."
And now you're just telling everybody in the world.
Well,
this poor woman. It's gonna come back to her.
I mean, no. She's untraceable, and in fact, it was a man and a non-Christian, clearly a non-Christian, and he was heavily mustachioed, had an eye patch. And told me he was very soon running for the Canadian border. So don't even try to find that concierge. But thank you to that young lady. If you're listening today, we had a wonderful stay in the Badlands. So that's number one, Badlands National Park, South Dakota. Now, Ryan, number two is called Canyonlands National Park in Utah. Have you ever heard of Canyonlands?
It doesn't sound real to me, Canyonlands. It sounds like,
sort
a
of
board game or...
Neverland. I mean, especially when you've got the Grand Canyon, they probably looked at that and were just like, well, what are we going to call this place? I guess we're Canyonlands. Now,
minor canyons is not nearly as exciting.
Now, if I had to make you guess, what do you think there's a lot of in Canyonlands?
I mean, I would imagine canyons.
I'd
be disappointed if there wasn't.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy, this Ryan Davis. Do you know that quote?
What is that from?
That's when Scrooge leans out his window and goes, "Boy, what day is it?"
Yes.
An intelligent boy, remarkable
Christmas
boy.
Day.
Always makes me think of Ryan Davis. Well, listen,
it's
Canyonlands Day. So Canyonlands, Utah. What I like to call out to folks is these lesser-known national parks, they're often national parks that live near other national parks that you're more likely to visit, like Arches. So Canyonlands National Park is near Arches National Park, and it's an easy drive out. And you will be rewarded with a much less populated park. Canyonlands is absolutely huge. It's this beautiful park, very rustic canyons and buttes that have been carved over time by the Colorado River and its many tributaries. And I actually think probably the best way to tell you about it is to tell you the different districts that the park has, because I think their names are so evocative in themselves. So the first one is called the Island in the Sky, which I got to say, whoever's naming national parks, you're doing a great job.
That sounds magical.
Isn't it
Island
beautiful?
In the Sky. Yeah.
So the Island in the Sky is a popular part of the park as far as popular goes here. And it's basically a mesa that's on top of sandstone cliffs. And you can look out in beautiful canyons. And you know that sense when you go out west, just the sky is just bigger?
Right, yeah.
They might almost want to name a place Big Sky. Just an idea. I'm just spitballing here. And it is one of those places where the sky could not look larger. And the changing, shifting clouds and light, every place you look is just a photograph that you want to take with your mind and come back to. I mean, it's just an absolutely gorgeous spot, spectacular landscape. So
do you have to hike?
In the sky.
Do you hike up to this hike up this mesa? Or?
So you can actually drive fairly close to get the viewpoints, but there are hikes in the area. And
Gotcha.
And particularly good is if you want a quite strenuous hike, you hike down into the canyons and then back up to viewpoints. That's what a lot of people are going to end up doing. But if you're just driving through or you have, half a day, go to Island in the Sky. That's your best chance for great views and memorable moments.
Are you renting like a 4-wheeler? Like what are you driving?
No,
like
you can
like
drive,
your
you can drive
Corolla
your-
up
Yeah,
there?
you can drive your car in there. Yeah,
Alright.
it's not a particularly steep area.
Yeah.
And so Island in the Sky, number one. The second is called the Needles. And the Needles, it's funny, they actually have Needles in South Dakota. And
I mean, they have needles in Brooklyn and San Francisco. I mean, just go outside and look. Needles are everywhere,
Well, Ryan, that's taken us to a much darker place. The Needles refer to sandstone structures that basically reach up into the sky, and time and wind and weather have worn them away until they look like these kind of proud needles that are sticking up into the sky.
Proud needles.
Yeah, they're proud. The weather's not getting them down. So it's sort of the hardest rock gets left behind,
Right.
and it creates these really cool geologic figures.
Are they sort of phallic?
To a certain mind, yes, I would say they appear a bit phallic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you always have a lot of phallus in your travel recommendations. I'm just saying,
I haven't noticed that trend, but
Bhutan was very phallic heavy.
there were some heavy phalluses in Bhutan. That's fair. You're referring to the divine madmen. And there's the cultural tradition. Here it is the natural remains of a beautiful natural process. And, again, I'll post some pictures. We'll put it right next to the black-footed ferret. And you can be the judge for yourself. In fact, I'll put the comment, phallus or not, and we'll see what people what people decide.
I know what my friends are going to vote.
Oh, God. I better not hashtag it phallus, or we're going to have a lot of disappointed viewers. The final two regions that are sort of named officially within the park are one, the maze. And the maze is really the backcountry. A lot of these huge national parks have an area that they call, it's very, you usually have to get permits to go there because you really have to have your own food, drink.
That's where the bodies are buried.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of true crime mysteries to be written about.
It's very much where the bodies get
maze.
found.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
the maze is one of these really off the beaten path areas, hard to get to, remote. Personally, I didn't visit the maze, but this is where if you really don't want to see anybody, I mean, you're already pretty much there at the Canyonlands, but this is going to get you really off the track.
And then the what's the fourth one?
So they have an area they call the rivers, which is basically just the deep canyons.
Okay.
And what's nice about hiking, or you can also do a river trip on these, is that it's very green and lush.
Yeah.
So where it can be arid and hot in these deserty kind of canyon areas, this is a place where you're going to get some relief and shade.
I really think the creator of Canyonlands was like, started off with like Island in the Sky, the Needles, the maze, the rivers,
Just a yawn. Oh, call it the rivers.
It was like 4:50. They're like, I gotta get out of here. The rivers sounds great.
They're looking at the Post-it notes. They're like, I don't know. This area has rivers, so have we called it? Can we call it Riverlands? And then one final part of the park that has been kind of added to the park because they were trying to protect some cultural artifacts in it is called Horseshoe Canyon. And the cultural artifacts are these very well-preserved, life-size human figures that are carved into the rock. And, these are left behind by native peoples who used to live in this area. And they have very beautiful, intricate designs. And Horseshoe Canyon was set aside just to protect these beautiful designs. So it's called the Great Gallery. And if you have time, you're going to have to hike to them, but well worth seeing these cultural treasures. And it stands.
So this makes me think of a point here. What makes that not a monument then? Right? I mean, those are that is not that is not a natural occurrence, right? It's not like the Painted Desert or the Grand Canyon, which Grand Canyon was made by some
Yeah, I
wooders.
understand. The truth is, this system has grown over time, and there are not hard and fast, strict rules. So while national parks are typically set aside for nature and recreation, they can preserve cultural artifacts like this. And so a perfect example of that is I've also been to a Colorado park that's not on this list, and it's called Mesa Verde. And at Mesa Verde, they actually preserve the cliff dwellings of Native American populations that lived there. And these are, constructed homes and community centers that are built underneath overhanging cliffs. And it is a national park, even though it does have that cultural value. So it's preserving both the nature and the culture.
Very cool.
These are slippery. I mean, you can research these things before you go, but you're calling out correctly. The line between monument and parks can change over time. Sometimes where you want to fund the protection of it changes over time. In this case, with Horseshoe Canyons, I think that there were some threats to its preservation, and so some astute legislators glued it on to the existing national park canyonlands that was already there, and thereby saved it.
Gotcha. And Mesa Verde, also the name of in Better Call Saul, the main subject of their lawsuit for 2 seasons. So
thank you very much. That added a lot to the conversation. So moving on to our third lesser-known national park. This one is called Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. I'm willing to bet you've never heard of that.
No, but I'm willing to bet that there are sand dunes there. That this is a sand dunes focused park.
I've said it once. I'll say it again. An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy, Ryan Davis. Yeah, it's known for these huge sand dunes. They're the tallest sand dunes in North America. And the way that they formed is super fascinating. So basically, this is in southern Colorado, and it's bordered by the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. I know you were very impressed with that Spanish.
Excellent pronunciation.
Now, can you remind me, what is Sangre de Cristo?
It means something of the Christ.
Very good. And you really can't guess what sangre might mean?
Land?
Nope, that's tierra.
Mountains of the Christ?
Nope.
No, because mountains is at the end there.
Yeah, so it's got the word mountains later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about
Jesus was not involved with a lot of mountains, okay? He was not a mountain kind of guy.
But you know what he was involved with? Blood. Loved the blood. He's got people drinking the blood. He's bleeding on the cross.
Sangre's blood.
That's right. It's the blood. That's the blood of Christ.
Name for
mountains.
Mountains.
It's a very intense name. Again, really knocking it out of the park, these marketers. Yeah. And what this is the lower southernmost range within the Rockies. So it's sort of a sub-range within the Rockies. And
so the blood of Christ Mountains is the actual. It's on a map. If I look,
no, but it's called Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Even And the way that the weather patterns go is that sediments from the mountains have over time worn down, and there used to be lakes in this area. I mean, I'm talking tens of thousands of years ago. And this sand would collect because winds are blowing across the lake towards the mountains. The lakes drain away, and what's left but these giant sand dunes.
Right. Okay.
And it is. I've never been to what I would properly call a desert, but this is like a what you picture, those vast dunes of the Sahara, but with mountains with snow on the top directly in the background, like directly bordering them.
That must be visually pretty striking.
It's very striking to see these very disparate terrains right next to each other.
Yeah.
But what is most striking is the activity that you do when you visit the Great Sand Dunes.
What activity do you do? You go dune buggying?
So that close, you go sand sledding. And
that sounds amazing.
It's incredible.
That's everything I want to do, minus because I want to go sledding, but I hate the idea of snow, right, and wetness.
I mean,
this seems like a dry way to do this.
But it is a very dry way to do it.
Yeah.
And what you do is, before you enter the park, you rent a sled, a board, which is basically just a wooden board with a veneer on it.
Yeah.
They give you a bar of wax, and you wax it
up. Of course,
up.
You got to wax it up, yeah.
And you get to the top of these dunes, and you plop down your board, and you sand sled straight down.
How steep is it?
They can get pretty steep. They can get pretty long. I found it significantly harder than sledding on snow. It's also significantly grittier, as you'd imagine.
Yeah.
And you know, if
it's warmer though,
it's a lot warmer. If you're like one of us, you've got your sunscreen on, and then quickly you have sort of a mask of sand.
Right. Probably good for your pores.
Absolutely.
Probably exfoliating.
But as far as I know, this is one of the few places in the world that you can sand sled, and I highly recommend it for that experience.
I've never even heard of sand sledding. I might become like one of these people who is like really aggressively into sand sledding. You know, like My extreme sport, it's like sand sled guy.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a great thing to do because, as you can imagine, hiking in this area can get a little monotonous. There are some forests close by, and you could get off to the mountains.
It
But
seems like a made-up activity. Like there was a bunch of bored kids out there one day in Colorado, and the dad's like, "What do we have? Well, we have a piece of wood. Well, go tell them to slide down that sand hill."
well,
over
let me
there."
tell you, the kids figured it out, and with that wax, you can really slide right down. Catherine was significantly better at sand sledding.
When I was a kid, we had a big hill in my yard, and we would use wax paper, and we would wax up like a piece of wood and slide down on the grass. So that was pretty hip.
On a piece of wax paper?
No, we'd use wax paper on a piece of wood, and we would make it really, really.
I see. That would 100% work. So if you're trying to save the rental fee, take this tip from Ryan: get a little plywood, put it on, bring it on as your carry-on. If you take Southwest, you can bring it on for free. You could even check it. Buy some wax paper, wax that baby right up. You've got a sand sled. Again,
just don't get any. You don't want to get any of those little wood things in you. Little
splinters.
Splinters, they call them.
Yeah,
I call them wood things.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I know you thought it might be called sangres. Great Sand Dunes National Park, incredibly scenic and unique. And what's interesting too is they have a little river that flows right by, and locals bring out beach chairs and they sit by it as if we on the coasts go to the beach, go to the shore.
Yeah, they just sit there and watch the folks just going down on the old on the old wood sleds.
It's really it's an extremely charming place. All right, Ryan. So number 4, we're going way up north to Alaska.
Alaska.
So I want to highlight here. It's a wonderful national park called Kenai Fjords National Park, and it's on the Kenai Peninsula in sort of south central Alaska, and it's near Seward. So Alaska, Seward's Folly. There's a town called Seward, and that's the town that's closest to this national park. And this park is typically seen from the water. So you will, kind of get on a cruise, a boat that goes in the waters of what's called Resurrection Bay, which is where Seward is. And you go out and you look at the glaciers that are there. And there are 40 glaciers there. But what I particularly want to talk about is a lesser known part of Kenai Fjords National Park, which is the part that you're not looking at from water, where you're actually hiking. And that's because for those who are intrepid enough, you can actually go and see the ice field that feeds all 40 of these glaciers. So do you know how a glacier works?
I just assume they were made a very long time ago, and
So what they basically are deeply compacted snow and ice that takes on that sort of blue hue that we associate with glaciers. But they are fed from above and come down mountains or slopes. And so there is always a source of ice at the top that is pushing them down over time. And what you can do at Kenai Fjords is you can visit what is called the Harding Ice Field. So Ryan, why do you and I love the Harding Ice Field?
I mean, because we both love Warren Harding.
Warren G. Harding.
One of the great Americans.
Absolutely. Actually, I think he was pretty corrupt, wasn't he?
Oh, I'm sure he was. He was president.
He was horrible. Warren G. Harding. It is named for Warren G. Harding. It's pretty amazing. All you had to do at that time was he promised to come visit Alaska, and they were like, okay, we'll name this magnificent ice field after you. But I will tell you, he did. It was named in 1922. He did actually come and visit Alaska in 1923.
I mean, Alaska was really far away in 1923.
Really far. There a lot of trains.
Yeah, you couldn't even see it from Russia. It was so far away.
I mean, believe it or not, he actually died on his way back from his Alaska trip. So it's far.
Was he on a WOW airline?
It's named for President Harding. And what it is you climb a trail. It's an 8.2 mile round trip trail. And you hike in these deep switchbacks through the woods, above the tree line, into the mountains. And you get to the top, and it becomes incredibly desolate. And what you're actually looking at is you're standing on top of a mountain, and you can see all in front of you is just pure snow and ice, with the occasional, in the difference, peak of a mountain popping through. And what you're looking at is thousands and thousands of feet of solid ice that actually surrounds mountains that that are totally hidden to the naked eye. And it is this ice field that feeds the 40 glaciers that then push down into Resurrection Bay.
And you're using the term feed, like it's supplying water and ice to like make the glaciers bigger, like
Yeah.
more.
So at the top
Yeah.
of the ice field, they get snow and precipitation, and that causes the weight that
Yeah.
crushes down the ice into that
Right.
glacial ice we think of. And then that ice over time, I mean, we're not talking about a
year,
a quick flow, but it's
are
a
they
slow
receding
flow.
or are they still growing?
So they are doing both. By and large, glaciers are receding, meaning that they are drawing further and further back into the mountains.
Right.
But at the same time, they are still being pushed down the mountain from this ice field. But I will tell you, I have never more felt that I was on a different planet than when I was looking out at this vast Harding ice field. And it was wonderful to be able to go out on the boat and see the glaciers and then climb up and see where they came from. But of course, as you're doing the 8.2 mile round trip, you're actually climbing 1,000 feet of elevation with every single mile that you hike. So it is steep.
Yeah,
And
that sounds exhausting.
my in-laws who were with me at the time will tell you that I actually lied to them. And, I felt like I read some places that it was a moderate hike, so I decided to focus on those. And I did see on the National Park site official, they say, experienced hikers only, must be in good physical shape. But I said to everybody, don't worry about, there's the Harding ice field. We'll go take a little peek and we'll climb
if
down.
Harding got up there, then anybody can.
I will say
Yeah.
my mother-in-law turned around. So
my gosh.
I'm sorry for that, everybody. But
I hope not by herself.
well, there were other people on the trail.
You let her walk down a mountain by a glacier field by herself?
I don't let anybody do anything. They're their own people.
That's true.
And so, but those who made it, I will say, still say to this day, the Harding ice field was well worth the visit. So if you're in Alaska, get off the boat and visit Kenai Fjords National Park, but go hike to the Harding ice field trail. All right, the last lesser-known national park is, it's not what you're thinking. I think when you think national park, you're typically thinking under the sun. This one is actually a cave system.
A cave? That actually sounds pretty exciting, actually.
So
A
it's one of
cave
the
system.
2 longest cave systems in the world. Both of
Wow.
those are in the United States. So I'm talking about Wind Cave National Park back in South Dakota, where we've revisited the Badlands. Now we're back in South Dakota. We're going to Wind Cave National Park.
I think Wind Cave might be the coolest name you've introduced us to.
Yeah,
so
it's
far.
wind like,
Right.
and
yeah, not wind. Yeah.
and well, it's not Wind. I just want it. There's no like Jacob Wind that it's named after.
Oh, no.
And it's got a great story behind the name, which is basically these 2 South Dakota brothers, the Bingham brothers. They're named Jesse and Tom. They were walking along in the wilderness, and they heard this whistling noise.
Sure.
And they came upon this tiny little hole in a rock face,
Right.
and it's where the whistling was coming from. And the story goes that the wind was blowing so hard out of the cave that it blew off one of the brothers' hats. Okay.
Wow.
And so a couple days later, the brothers are bringing back some of their friends. They're saying, look at this weird hole that we found.
you got to see this
mountain."
wind. You got to see this wind hole. And if you live in South Dakota, a wind hole is like the most exciting thing you've seen in years.
Absolutely. It's such
The
a
whole town's just going down to the wind hole.
classic wind hole. Hey, did you hear Tommy found a wind hole? But what was weird about the wind hole this time when they went back is that it was no longer blowing out. It was sucking in. And so the hat that had been blown off this time was sucked into the little hole and disappeared into the rock face.
This is not true.
This is the story. And so the Bingham brothers, with their friends, started to pick away at the hole. And lo and behold, they revealed that there was an enormous cave system behind it. And in fact, this is one of the 2 longest cave systems in the world. The other one, which we're not going to talk about today, is actually a national monument called Jewel Cave. I also went there. We'll get there. We got to do a whole spelunking episode because I'm a big cave visitor. And believe it or not, Wind Cave National Park is actually 140 miles of trails underneath the earth.
140 miles? Is it lit? Do they have electricity in there, or you bring like a?
So they do have electricity for the part that you can tour, but serious spelunkers go much further in. And 140, I mean, that is at best a guess. It goes further back and deeper than has been fully mapped.
You know what we got to get? We got to get Elon Musk in there, and he can just send one of his amazing robots all the way into the end of the cave. And he built that cave drilling robot to go.
Well, I'm not
map
sure
this
we
cave.
want to drill the cave, you see, because
No, we want to map it. We want to see what's in there.
yeah, but you'll be mapping something that he has destroyed by
That's
sending
true.
in a
That's
drilling
true.
robot.
This is also the start to like every horror movie I've ever seen. Like, look, there's a wind hole. What's down there? And then all like some beast 140 miles below the surface of the
it
earth.
gets woken up
Yeah,
by a
yeah.
little robot hitting it in the head.
Yeah. Thanks, brothers. What are they? Who are these brothers?
The Bingham
again?
brothers.
Thanks, Bingham brothers. Yeah.
So they talk about the cave that it actually breathes, and what happens is the atmospheric pressure changes above ground and below ground, and depending on where the difference is, the wind will rush in or
Yeah.
it will blow out. It's self-regulating.
You said breathes, and I heard breeds, and I was like, oh my god, that's horrifying. Like
Always going back to the phallus.
all these little caves running around everywhere.
Well, I guess we had a needle on one side, we had a wind
Yeah.
hole on the other. You put them together.
You got a new national park. Yeah.
You got a great marketing campaign for South Dakota. So, they say that the hat that got sucked in has never been found. So they challenge visitors. If you go on the tour with a national park ranger, they will tell you, keep your eye out for that hat.
Oh, they're so funny.
And I do want to give it credit for two more interesting facts about it, which is Wind Cave was actually a sacred site for the Native American people, the Lakota, that lived there. And while there's lots of different creation stories that have spread and been recorded over the thousands of years, to the Lakota people, Wind Cave is actually seen as sort of the origin point of their people, of the Buffalo Nation. And so I was lucky enough to have a national park ranger who was Lakota and shared with us the importance to her people of this area. And so, again, it's great that the national parks are protecting this cave system.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So thinking about the 5 parks that you've shared with us today, the one that I think that Wind Cave would be the one that I'd most want to visit, although I am incredibly curious about Canyonlands because I want to this sort of island in the sky.
Yeah, absolutely. So romantic.
Yeah, yeah.
So one last time, Ryan, while I appreciate that you love the Canyonlands, the full list, number 1, we've got Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Number 2, Canyonlands National Park in Utah. Number 3, the Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. Number 4, Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska. And number 5, Wind Cave National Park in South Dakota. While the land above is preserved, beautiful prairie, you got to get down when you go to Wind Cave.
Get down is my motto. Kiernan.
Ryan. All right, Ryan. Well, I think with that, we can leave. Surely we will be revisiting lesser-known national parks in the future, but for today, I think it's time to head to the last stop.
Let's blow on over to the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
What is the last stop, Kiernan?
Ryan, the last stop is the segment every week where you and I each talk about one thing that we've done to feed our wanderlust. So it can be something we've read or we've cooked or visited, maybe a local tourism spot, something to keep the spirit of travel alive, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I want to ask you, do you have a last stop this week?
Yeah, I do, because I know how much our audience loves to hear about my Broadway travels. I jumped on...
The numbers do not show that to be true, but...
I jumped on a train yesterday out to New Brunswick, which is
New Jersey?
a lovely little town in New Jersey.
All right.
And I went to see the Rent 20th Anniversary National Tour at the beautiful State Theater in New Brunswick. And I had a wonderful time. I've done this New Brunswick sort of theater trip before. I went out to see Hedwig and the Angry Inch at the State Theater. And the State Theater is this old, but really beautiful, huge theater in New Brunswick that a lot of national tours and sort of smaller bands will come through and play at.
Now, now, does the theater exclusively do, you mentioned Hedwig, Rent, do they only do shows that I hate?
No, I mean they had a Mary Poppins production coming in.
Now I'm on board.
Yeah, they got Cats. I mean, they got everything you need there. Whatever's touring. But I think it makes for a really lovely sort of evening, and I recommend. You can check out to see what's playing at the State Theater. Like it's not just musical theater and Broadway plays, but a whole bunch of musicians. And the downtown sort of downtown New Brunswick is really charming. And there's this one restaurant that I like to eat at because It's billed at it's called Clyde's, and it's
Is
billed
that
for their
CLYDE'S?
no CLYDZ like Clyde's.
Ooh, oh wow, Clyde's is cool.
And it sort of feels like like Tony Soprano would be very comfortable having a meal at Clyde's, right?
Okay.
And it's billed as it's a cocktail wine place that has exotic meat. Exotic meat.
Okay.
So right before I went to see Rent, went down to Clyde's and I had sort of the alligator. They have this sort of alligator in a blanket,
Sure.
which is like pigs in a blanket, but it's alligator.
Mhm.
So I didn't have. I had that last time.
I think our listeners probably caught on to that before you spelled it out.
But this time I tried python ravioli. Have you ever had python?
I've never eaten python.
Yeah. It's a little, it's slippery. It's a little chewy.
Sure.
It's not something
Does
that
it have a little bite?
Oh yeah, it's got a little. It's got a little bite. You gotta watch out. But pretty yummy place. Definitely a fan of it. And if you have additional time, I actually think the Rutgers Art Museum because Rutgers is sort of New Brunswick is a college town. Rutgers is sort of surrounds it.
Yeah.
Has a really wild collection of Soviet propaganda and nonconformist anti-propaganda art that is absolutely fascinating. So, check out the State Theater. It's a beautiful old theater in New Jersey. Grab yourself some python ravioli there at Clyde's, and go check out the Soviet propaganda at the Dodge collection at the Rutgers campus.
And that's Clyde's with a Z.
Clyde's with a Z.
And just a quick question I think is relevant.
Sure.
How if you're going out to see Rent, you're leaving New York City to get to New Brunswick, how many minutes does that take? Does it take? I
do want to say though, I enjoyed the production very much. But there's a line in Rent that you can take the girl out of Jersey, but you can't take the Jersey out of the girl.
Oh.
And I have never heard such an applause as when that moment happened. I thought they could stop the show. But
I think it's great that they're applauding leaving New Jersey. They're like, yes, yes. All right. Well, that sounds great.
Well, what's your last stop this week, Kiernan?
Now, Ryan, my last stop, I did a local tourism spot here in Boston. It's at a place called the Parker House Hotel. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not, no.
So the Parker House Hotel is actually the oldest continually running hotel in the United States. It's a bit of a Boston institution. It's about 5 minutes back from Boston Common. Anyone who has been a tourist here has probably walked right by it. And it's now called the Omni Parker House Hotel. But you walk in and it's a very old school experience. Dark wood, big ceilings. It's a hotel that they have kept kind of true to its historic roots.
Right.
And Ryan, those historic roots go back quite a long way. While it was built in 1927, the original Park House Hotel was actually built in 1855.
1850. That is an old hotel.
And so, I went for breakfast there, and a very kind of formal white tablecloth sort of dining room. And it is famous for having been the place where Boston cream pie was created. But that is not the reason that I went. The reason that I went is that from 1912 to 1913, you'll never guess who worked in the kitchen of Parker House Hotel in Boston.
I'm going to say either an Adams or a Romney.
Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh?
Ho Chi Minh. It's a part of his life that is not very well known about, but Ho Chi Minh, the Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh, like Ho Chi Minh City, Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah, like the Ho Chi Minh whose body you can still visit preserved in Hanoi, that Ho Chi Minh.
Right.
When he was a young man, he actually did a tour through Europe, spent some time in France and England, and then came to the United States. And in fact, he had some admiration for the United States. And part of that time he spent working in the Parker House Hotel. Now, I didn't see any actual call outs of this. It's not like they have Ho Chi Minh Boston cream pie or something on the menu.
They're missing out, by the way.
But it's a fascinating chapter, of all the kind of historic figures that you would expect to be in this kind of old school. It feels very like Boston Brahmin hotel. You don't really expect it to be connected to our enemy during the Vietnam War.
I had no idea that Ho Chi Minh lived in the United States. That is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's I will actually put a link in the podcast show notes. It's a PRI story about Public Radio International story about his time in America. Relatively little is known, but it's fascinating to hear what he actually took away from those experiences, from what we can tell. So I'll give a link to that.
Yeah, having Ho Chi Minh like cook you a cheeseburger is sort of like, if your eye doctor used to be like Al Assad,
Oh God!
it's like, oh yeah, he used to do my contacts before he went to run Syria.
Yeah, well, you never know. That's why you got to be nice to everybody.
Yeah, world leaders have jobs before they're before they run the countries.
That's the main takeaway. I actually think maybe that young clerk in the Badlands National Park, I think that man may have grown up to be Bolsonaro in Brazil. I'm pretty sure I saw a certain resemblance there. So anyway, be kind to everyone you meet, from the kitchen workers straight through to the cleaning staff to the front desk staff, because you just never know who's going to grow up to be Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan. Well, what are we talking about next week?
I have a surprise for you, Kiernan.
What?
You're gonna love this.
Oh my God.
Rick Steves.
Rick Steves going to be on the show?
No. Rick Steves is not going to be on the show. I mean, we've asked him, and we got to. If I get one more cease and desist letter from Rick Steves,
no, we got a soft no. If anything, it was more of a check back later. It wasn't a no.
Yeah, it was a circle back.
It was a circle back. It was a circle back.
In my experience, when people tell me to circle back, it always means yes later on. It doesn't mean like I'm going to never read your emails again.
I mean, I know that I told you no, I don't want to be your friend about 100 times before you cracked my defenses.
Circle back.
Yeah, and you just kept circling back.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have a seat in the podcast studio here in Brooklyn for Rick Steves if he wants to show up. But if not, we're gonna talk a bit about his career and what he's working on.
Absolutely, the majesty that is Rick Steves. That's next week.
Well, until next week, I'm Ryan Davis,
and I'm Kiernan Schmidt,
and this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
I am so ready to go spelunking,
Listen, I'll pack the Python ravioli. You get the gear.
You gotta bring the ravioli with you.
I'll see you there.